All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to another video. I did finally, after talking about it for years and years and years, get a new microphone, new mic, new headset. I got a whole bunch of new stuff. We're here, we're live, we're doing great time. And so now, I'm gonna make a video today. And today I want to talk a bit about OWCS Stage 1. I want to talk about EMEA, NA, a little bit about what's going on in Asia, and just briefly touch on China. We haven't really gotten anything yet for China, but I wanted to touch a little bit about what to expect here in the next couple of weeks as we get into the China region. But I wanted to just do a little bit of a recap, talk about what happened in EMEA and North America, give you my thoughts on the 4 teams that have qualified for the Champions Clash that will be happening in Hangzhou, China next month. 2 from North America and 2 from EMEA have qualified. Who are the teams? What are my initial kind of thoughts on those teams? And then, like I said, talk about Korea, or, well, Asia, but it's just the Korean teams that are left, and give you my thoughts on those teams and what I think will happen there. So, hopefully this mic sounds good. Hopefully everything is great and works out well. This is what happens when you finally, after years, upgrade your equipment. So let's start by talking about EMEA, where at least one of the teams was exactly as expected. I'll throw up the bracket for EMEA here so you can see the 4 teams. The 2 teams that qualified for the Champions Clash in Hangzhou and just the overall bracket itself. As you can see, it was Virtus Pro, the team that spent the entire year in EMEA as the best team. Day 1, week 1, they beat Genji 3-1, and ever since, they've been pretty convincingly the best team in EMEA. They beat Genji again, they beat ATVI, and then they beat ATVI again in the grand final. So winning that upper bracket final obviously locked in their spot for Hangzhou, but it was obviously the EMEA clinching, kind of title for the first stage here in EMEA over ATVI. That's in their grand final. That was the really, really big game. And of course, ATVI, the other team, moving on to the Champions Clash here from EMEA. Another kind of surprising team here. And I'll talk about them here in a second, but I did want to talk a bit about Virtus Pro and what they've done so well, because they've been very, very good this year. And I think one of the things that I've been very impressed by is just how consistent they've been, the level of play they've had, especially from their backline. They have been really, really good, and it's not just the kind of thing where the rest of the teams around them aren't good. There's a lot of very, very huge talent in EMEA, players that are very, very good, and arguably on paper, a lot of the teams in EMEA are better than Virtus Pro. But what we've seen out of Fixa and Gala in that backline has been incredibly consistent, and they've been really good, and that has been a huge benefit to this team. Shockwave and Jwoo have been incredible DPS players. I mean, Jwoo is someone who I did not expect to be this good at all, and he has just been absolutely mind-blowingly incredible this year, alongside Shockwave, who's one of the best hit scan players in EMEA right now, maybe even in the world. He's a world-class player in that role. Vistola, we knew Vistola was very, very good. He's obviously diversified his game quite a lot over the past couple of years, which has also been quite helpful for this team. So when you look at this team and you see what they are capable of, there is a level of excitement kind of seeing this team move on out of EMEA, get that win in this region. And it was honestly kind of interesting because I feel like EMEA was pretty competitive all year. There's some very good teams in EMEA across the board, really, when you think about, how good the Ultimates looked on paper, and they had a very good run in this tournament, despite not being a great team during the regular season. Twisted Minds look very good on paper. Genji had a very good season so far. ATVI, of course, kind of coming out of nowhere. Team Peps. All 6 of the teams in EMEA, realistically, it would not have been a surprise for any of them to qualify and move on, which you wouldn't say that really at all about, North America, for example, where if it wasn't the top 4 that qualified, it was a huge surprise. Here in EMEA, it really was like a 6-horse race. Any of the 6 could have moved on and no one would have really been that surprised. And the fact that Virtus.pro was as consistently dominant as they were and really just kind of rolled their way over the competition here to qualify as the only team undefeated right now in the world in OWCS. Nobody else in OWCS is undefeated. Crazy Raccoon and Falcons and Zeta and Wei have all lost in Korea. Nightmare and SSG obviously have lost in North America. We haven't seen China yet, so I guess they're all technically undefeated. But it is a notable thing that in a region as competitive as EMEA, Virtus.pro has walked away undefeated. And I think they're a very solid team from top to bottom. They have a lot of really, really, really good pieces, and they've been playing consistently well at a high level. And I think you have to really give a lot of credit to this team. The coaching staff is phenomenal. Smash is a great head coach, and that helps bolster this roster of very talented players to have a really good support system like that. So I've been very impressed with Virtus.pro. I'm not surprised at all that they made it to this tournament. We all kind of knew they were going to make it. They were a team that we all believed would make it, and they did. And that's one of those things that really does go a long way when you consider how good the competition is going to be in Hangzhou, that this team has been as consistently dominant as they have been. Yeah, there's a bit of issue potentially about what happens when they lose, because they will eventually lose a game. I don't think anyone here seriously thinks they're never going to lose a game this year. So can they compete if they have to play against some of the best teams coming out of Korea and North America and China? We'll see. But I think the fact that they've been as dominant as they have been really speaks volumes to just the team that they have built and the talent that they have built and how much they have put into having a competitive roster, and what that means for this team really cannot be understated. And I think it is a huge, huge, huge sign of confidence for this team for what they've been able to do. And I look forward to seeing them in this Champions Clash in China, where, of course, they'll be joined by OWCS, really the dark horses of EMEA that going into the tournament, you kind of knew there was something going on there, just because of how close they played Virtus.pro in that first matchup they played in the regular season. They've played them 3 times. They took maps off Virtus.pro every single time, which you might think that's not that big of a deal. But OWCS and Gen G are the only 2 teams in EMEA to even take maps off of Virtus.pro, right? And so the fact that OWCS has taken, 4 or 5 maps total off of Virtus.pro is a pretty big sign. And I think really for me, what was really impressive about OWCS is this is a team that going into the season, I was not super high on this team. I thought they had some good talent. When you think about players like Checkmate and Landon, who have been very good on some very good teams. Labda, who we look at as kind of a high player, like someone who we rate kind of highly, but we'd only really seen him perform really well on like Farah, maybe Echo. It was the kind of team that you really didn't have the diversity you'd want for someone to potentially be like a hit scan player on this team, right? Like you were going to rely on Labda to be your Sojourn player, your hit scan player. And he has proven me wrong. He has been phenomenal on that hero. Now, does that mean it'll translate over to Cassidy, to Ashe, to Widowmaker? Not necessarily. Sojourn, obviously, her primary fire is projectile, so that makes it a little bit easier when you are a projectile player. But I was just very impressed by what this team was able to do with a roster that is good, but a lot of these players, at least for me, are not known quantities. I didn't know who Ziad was. He was playing tank like the entire year. I had no idea who this guy was. Tread, we saw obviously a little bit occasionally. Haku, I think, was on the World Cup team for Saudi Arabia. So I knew some of these players, but most of these players outside of Checkmate, Labda, and Landon weren't playing in the biggest matches in the OWCS or the Overwatch League in the past couple of years. And so to see this team come out, and not just come out, but come out pretty dominantly. You look at their wins. I mean, 3-0 over Peps, 3-0 over the Ultimates, taking maps against Virtus Pro. This is a team that did very well in a region full of incredible talent. And I think, certain metas could not work as well for this team. If it goes to a hard hit scan meta, do I think Lambda will be able to have as much success against the likes of Kai or Exodial or Shockwave still? Or some of the other really good hit scan players that we have in this region? Maybe not. Quartz, but there is something to be said about this team being able to play in a meta that seemingly was not built for them. At least I wouldn't have guessed it going into this season, that they would do well in a meta that you needed a really good Sojourn player. And we saw Lambda take a huge step up and play very good Soj this year. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for what he has done to improve his hero pool and really diversify and really step up his game going into this season. I was incredibly impressed by him. He is my underrated MVP of the EMEA stage, just because no one, like maybe a couple people, I don't know what the Saudi community is like, and maybe there was a little more belief in Lambda as a player there, but outside of, Saudi Arabia, how many people really believed Lambda to be a phenomenal Sojourn player? I don't think there's that many people, but he looked really good, which was notable and impressive. And so, I think this is one of those teams where they definitely go into this tournament as, once again, the dark horse in China. It was not the cleanest, region. There was a lot of sloppy play in EMEA. AWCS was just cleaner, very well coached with Junk Buck. So I like what we've seen out of AWCS. I think they probably will do what they can to hold their own. I would be surprised if they were able to walk away from the Champions Clash with a really, really strong result. But I was impressed by what they did. And, beating the Ultimates 3-0, and it was a 3-0, but it was a close 3-0, but they constantly were able to close out games in the ways the Ultimates weren't. Maybe depending on if they played a different team, maybe if the matchup wasn't as favorable, maybe they lose, but they got what they needed to do. Their win against Peps really was kind of the game that clinched it for them, because once they beat Peps, all they had to do was win one game. Right? They beat Peps, cool. We can lose to Virtus Pro, we got to win one game. Right? Like, if you make it to that upper bracket finals, you are in such an advantageous position, right? Like, if you're one of the top 4 teams, you just had to win 2 games. And AWCS barely managed to sneak into that spot. And they ran away with it. And that was the biggest thing that they did. I think it's really nice to see a non-partner team do well. And we'll talk about that, of course, with North America. But a lot of love, in my honest opinion, has to go out to what they were able to do in a region that I just did not think they could compete in. Frankly, I thought that the region was a little more top-heavy than it ended up being. I thought it was going to be, the Ultimates and Twisted Minds and Virtus Pro and Gen G, and then there was going to be a bit of a drop-off when you got to teams like Peps and AWCS. And it just wasn't that way. AWCS just really did put their foot on the gas, never really let up, and were one of the consistent best teams, especially the last 2-3 weeks. They really looked like an elite team in this region. And kudos to them for getting it done. This was a very good result, right? And you have teams like the Ultimates and Twisted Minds, and I'm not going to spend too much time talking about them, but they had good moments this weekend, but they just were not consistent. They couldn't close out. The Ultimates could not close out their maps against AWCS, right? To me, AWCS played well every game. Even when they played Virtus Pro, they looked good. Virtus Pro is just really, really good. And they are that much better, I think, right now than what we've seen from anybody else, maybe in the West as a whole. And so I think looking at what we have seen in EMEA and seeing like the best parts of EMEA and the worst parts of EMEA and how they've all kind of come together, to me it is a very telling sign that we have maybe the 2 best teams coming out of EMEA, and the reasoning why they are as good as they are is not just because of the name value or anything like that, but we have just seen consistency from these teams where they are good teams with players who are really meshing, and they're not teams that are getting hard carried by one player. They are really, really, really good, well-oiled machines. And it shows you that a winning formula doesn't have to necessarily just be get all of the single best players. It's build a culture, build a team that works together, and that's how you win games. And it's what's working in EMEA for sure. And I think even in North America and Korea, you're seeing teams that are really, really good, that have good players. Obviously, if you're getting totally outdiffed on the talent scale, it's struggle to win no matter what. But I think it is nice to see that even some of the best players in the world don't just win every game because of their name value, right? Because of the history behind them. That what we're seeing is that the best teams are the ones that are putting in the work and the effort to build really good teams and rosters and communities that can then play to win in those big moments. I think that's really, really big. That's enough yapping about EMEA. Let's move on and talk a bit about North America. Obviously, North America a bit different from EMEA in that this one is very top heavy. Top 4 teams we all know are the 4 best teams, so it was no real surprise that at the end the top 4 teams were SSG, Liquid, Nightmare, and Timeless, who were the top 4 teams after the regular season. They're the top 4 teams in the playoffs. I think to me, right now, it looks like a pretty clear situation where Timeless looks to be the 4th best team. The only good win they have this year, the only win they have against one of the top teams, is that win against Team Liquid from week 1. They lost to SSG twice. They lost to Nightmare. And I think what you see with Timeless is just a team that is good, that has talent, but I think that they're a little bit behind where the other 3 teams are in the region. Nightmare being really kind of the biggest, I don't want to say surprise, because I think everybody knew Nightmare was good, and there were people picking Nightmare to make it out of this tournament. It came down to who wins that first matchup between Nightmare and Liquid that happened in the upper bracket semifinals. That first weekend of games, Nightmare had beaten Team Liquid the week before the tournament started. They play again a week later, and Liquid gets the win, and then they play again a week later, and it goes back to Nightmare, right? So it's a really close series. I actually like that we're seeing this matchup quite a lot because there's some similarities with these teams, some history with these teams, of course, with Infected formerly being on Nightmare last year, moves over to Liquid now for this year. And Nightmare is just one of those organizations that has been very committed to Overwatch over the past couple of years. And so it's nice to see an organization like that find the success that you would like to see them have. They've been really, really good. I think they have phenomenal talent across the board. Obviously, Kuffa has really impressed me on that tank role in ways that I didn't really expect that he would. Really good play out of Lethal, of course, one of the best hitscan players playing in the West right now. And he has been really, really phenomenal. And just overall, this team has a really good understanding of who they are and what their identity is. Their support line, Admiral Ultraviolet, is maybe the best in North America. I think I said that at the beginning of the year. That I thought they might at least be in the conversation for the best support line in North America. I will say that the SSG support line has also impressed me a lot. I didn't think they would be as good as they were. I kind of was not as high on CJ as maybe I should have been. But CJ Bliss has been really, really good. And I think, obviously, you have the RuPaul Vega support line on Team Liquid, which is also a really, really good support line. So those 3 are to me, it's those 3 support lines are far and away the 3 best support lines, depending on certain metas. Obviously, if Ana's really good, you're going to get much better play out of Ultraviolet here on Nightmare than maybe you would if it was a Zen meta or a Kiri meta or whatever. But I was really impressed by Nightmare. At the end of the day, the 2 top teams from the regular season in North America were the 2 teams that qualified. Not in the order they finished, obviously. Nightmare was the 2nd seed in North America, and SSG was the 1st. They finished with Nightmare at 1st, SSG in 2nd, but it was a very good showing from both of those teams. And I think what I look at with Nightmare is just they have managed to put together a really solid core of players who we saw a lot of these players play very well last year. Zera, to me, might be in the conversation for the best DPS player in North America right now. Kuffa has taken a huge, leap into being one of the elite tank talents in the West. And you get to pair Zera with someone like Lethal, who's been really, really good. I've already talked about the support line. This team just clicks in a lot of ways. They fire on all cylinders, and they check a lot of the boxes that I like. They have flexibility in the tank role, which sometimes you need, sometimes you don't. It depends really on what your team situation is. If you can rely on Kuffa for the whole year, then you're probably going to be fine. If you have to put clear in every so often, then you do, but they've been pretty consistent with what they've stuck with. And it just helps to have a team that is that good. When you have options if you need them, but you don't have to bring them in, you just end up with a really solid core. And I am all love to Zera, man. He has really, really stepped it up this year. He was very good last year. I don't want to act like he wasn't good last year. Obviously, Nightmare last year with the Seeker Zera DPS duo was really, really good as well. But I feel like this year they're clicking in a way that we didn't even really see from them last year. And they've impressed me quite a lot. So I've been really excited to watch this Nightmare team step up. Like I said, I'm really just happy for this org because I love that we are seeing this org take that leap. Because they were very good last year. This is a really good org last year that did a lot of great things. They got second in North America towards the end of the year. They were a team that kept kind of getting better and better and better, and that was really good to see. And it's nice to see them take that next step to win a tournament in this region, which is pretty competitive, right? Like, that is a huge thing. And I'm super excited that this team has managed to make that jump and make that leap and be in the conversation for some of the best teams in the West. If only because of what this organization has done committing to Overwatch that they have. And, I love to see in an ecosystem like this, you do want to see some of those orgs that are committed to the game do well in as many ways as possible, right? I think it's better for the esport if there are teams that aren't partnered that are also good. You want good partner teams, but you also want the non-partner teams to be competitive as well. You don't want it to be just the same 2-3 teams every single tournament, and then it's just boring at that point. You want something exciting and fun and interesting, and I think we're getting that with how good Nightmare has been. And of course, they qualify alongside Space Station Gaming, who were not technically, they were the first team to qualify from North America by winning in the upper bracket final to lose in the grand final to Nightmare. But I think SSG will be okay. I think when you have a roster as good as SSG with players as good as SSG, you're going to be fine. Like, Kellen is doing really, really well this year. He gives you what you want. They might not have the best meta for him right now. Obviously, like, Malga meta's not his ideal. He wants to play stuff like Winston, like Ryan, things like that. Those are his best heroes. And so you want to play more of those picks as opposed to the Malga meta. But when you have, like, the Sugar-Free Seeker DPS duo is really, really good. And like I said, Bliss and CJ have been really good in the supports. And CJ has been, to me, someone who has really stepped it up this year that I did not think was as good as he is going into this year. And he's been really, really good. So I have to give a lot of credit to what this team has been able to do. I had them number 2 in my power rankings at the beginning of the year because I didn't fully believe in the support line. And they have been so good and so consistent. And so, to me, the 2 best teams in North America moved on, right? Like, North America's pretty top heavy, but going into the tournament, these look like the 2 best teams, and they walk out as the 2 best teams. Maybe not in the order we thought they would, but I'm very excited and happy to see that this went the way that it did, because I really like both of these orgs. I'm glad both these orgs are as committed to the scene as they are both as committed to the game Overwatch as they are. It makes it matters. Like, it makes a huge difference when you have good teams and good organizations competing and joining into stuff like this and making it far into tournaments. Because you want to see the organizations that care and that are committed being the ones that actually make it to tournaments. Hot take, but you want the committed organizations to make it. You don't want teams that are just like there. Like, that was like last year when all these teams joined because of Esports World Cup. Like, it was cool to see, but some of those teams and organizations didn't care about the game. They cared about the payday from EWC. And so this year, when you have organizations like Nightmare, like SSG, like Virtus Pro, even like Timeless, that are committed, like Team Peps, they care about Overwatch. They want to be a part of the Overwatch community. And seeing them perform well and make it to these events and be competitive is a good thing. That's why I'm very excited that that's what we're getting here in North America, is two very committed orgs moving on and finding success over teams that, to be fair, like, I'm not going to say like bad things about Team Liquid. Obviously, Team Liquid is committed to the scene. They are a partnered team. They put together a really good roster. And it's a good thing to look at and see that this is another organization that is buying in. But there is something special about seeing these organizations that were committed even when there wasn't the money, even when this partnership program wasn't in place. Seeing those teams get rewarded for their good performance and good service and all that kind of stuff, however you want to describe it, is a good thing to see. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about North America because it kind of went the way we expected. And I spent a little too much time talking about EMEA. So real quick, let's talk a bit about Korea, or the Asia finals, I should say, which is just the top 4 teams from Korea competing in that. So I'll throw the bracket up real quick just so you can kind of see round 1. You can see Crazy Raccoon will be facing off against Zeta Division. I actually think by the time this video goes up... Oh, no, the games start Friday. Okay. The games started... I wasn't sure when the game started. So these games won't have happened yet. So you have Crazy Raccoon versus Zeta Division round 1, and then Team Falcons against Wei. Wei, obviously the huge surprises in Korea. No one really expected them to be this good going into the year, but they've been really, really good. Who Are You has been really good. And Maka, the 2 Florida Mayhem bench riders that have a championship under their belt, are proving why they got signed by that Florida Mayhem roster. But I think that most likely this is going to be Crazy Raccoon and Team Falcons once again. Maybe Zeta from the lower bracket, but in the qualifiers for this, Falcons did take the series against Zeta 3-2. It's not guaranteed, obviously. Zeta could bounce back and knock off a Crazy Raccoon or knock off a Team Falcons. They've beaten both of the teams so far this year, but the way I look at it right now, Falcons played well in that game against Zeta. They needed to do it to kind of get themselves back up on their feet after a kind of rough showing in the seeding decider matches. And there's some rumors about who Falcons are going to be bringing in going into Stage 2. So it does kind of feel like if Zeta wants to win, they kind of have to do it now, because this might be the weakest Falcons is for a long time. If the Someone Merit rumors are true and they bring those players in. Wei is a very interesting team. Wei has beaten Team Falcons, so I guess it is possible that Wei could knock Falcons off again. I don't think they will, but they have done it once already, and they could do it. But I would suspect Crazy Raccoon and Team Falcons are the top 2 teams coming out of this region. As much as I want to see Zeta move on, I really like Zeta as a team. I love this roster. I like the organization. I really like what they've done. I've liked the commitment that we've seen from them. I think this is a fun team to watch. Obviously, Violet being at an event is always good for that event. Violet is a really, really good player and a big name player who a lot of people know and like to see play. So I'd like to see them make it. If I had to pick, it would be Zeta versus Crazy Raccoon for the grand final in Asia, but I think Team Falcons will be okay. And I think it's going to be just like it was last year with Crazy Raccoon and Falcons moving on. So sorry for the not very exciting breakdown of Asia, but that's really how I see it going. I just don't see it going a different way, because it just seems like that's where things are going. Same way it was last year. Even when one team looked kind of bad, it didn't matter at the end. They were still the top 2 teams. Korea is certainly more competitive this year than it was last year, but I still think right now you have to go with Crazy Raccoon and Falcons. But I hope I'm wrong, and I hope we see Zeta in China. Speaking of China, we don't have any information yet fully on the teams competing in China. We have some of the qualified teams or the teams that will be playing in the qualifiers, but it's like the biggest list of teams I've ever seen. There was a list on Reddit that was crazy. So I don't expect to get any real news about that for another couple weeks, but I wanted to just throw out there that once we do know the news about China, once we know where people are going to be playing, once we know the rosters, once we have the teams, I will do a video talking about China and giving you my predictions on it. But, you know, we know once again is competing. We've seen their roster. They're going to be fine. If they don't qualify, I'd be amazed. I think Rock Esports is also competing, and they have a pretty solid roster, if memory serves me correctly. They've got, like, Mali Lengsa for their backline. They have Dia, Choi Se-won, and Belisari as their tank. So that is also a team that's probably going to be pretty good. So there's a couple of good teams in China, but we haven't seen all of them yet. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But I just wanted to give a little love to China since I'm talking about the other 3 regions here. And China, we just haven't gotten any real news about it yet. So when we do, and once we know the teams, don't worry, I will talk about it. This is a bit of a longie, but it's been a little while since I've recorded a video, and hey, I got no equipment, and so I felt like you all are deserving of getting some new stuff. So let me know in the comments down below your thoughts on anything I talked about, where you think these teams all stack up against each other. Are you of the opinion Virtus Pro is the best team in the West right now? Do you look at what's going on in North America and think one of those 2 teams is going to go out on top there? What do you think is going to happen in Korea? Anything like that, I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. But that is going to be all from me for today. If you enjoyed this video and want more like it in the future, consider liking and subscribing, as your support does help out a lot with the channel. But that's going to be all from me for today. Thank you all once again. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.